Hey guys, tonight we journey deep into a world so drenched in dread that you'll probably feel the humidity creeping up your spine. You stand barefoot on mossy ground, tangled roots twisting around your ankles like curious snakes, while cicadas scream their endless metallic chorus above. The air tastes of rotting fruit and distant wood smoke. Ahead rises a throne carved from ivory and crocodile bone, towering atop a dais of human skulls baked brown by tropical sun. On it sits the cannibal queen, her eyes half-lidded with boredom, fingernails stained crimson from feasting on the flesh of those who once defied her. You probably won't survive this, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the narrow path leading to her domain, thorns snagging your sleeves as if the jungle itself wants to keep you. Giant moths flicker like dying lanterns under the moonlight. Local legends claim this path is cursed. If you walk it alone, her spirit still follows behind you, just beyond your hearing. Barefoot on wet leaves, she was born to an unnamed mother, a concubine, some say. Others whisper a captive woman from a rival tribe, and she clawed her way up from nothing. Historians still argue whether her father was a dying old chieftain or a passing trader who left before sunrise. What no one disputes is that by age 16, she commanded the respect of warriors twice her age. Her earliest followers told tales of her hunting crocodiles alone at dawn, returning with dripping jaws slung over her shoulders like grotesque trophies. One mainstream historical fact: in many ancient Central African kingdoms, female rulers wielded as much political and spiritual authority as male chiefs. Power did not belong solely to men, though later colonial interpretations erased these women from records. She was no mere consort, she ruled outright. Her enemies, however, feared her not only for her military cunning, but for her rumored rituals. Picture this. Night has fallen. Torches blaze with resinous smoke, and she sits silently before a carved wooden idol, its bulging eyes painted with ochre. One fringe tidbit claims she coated her own eyelids with powdered bone to mimic those staring god eyes, enhancing her aura of divine terror. Whether for intimidation or devotion, it worked. As you approach the temple grounds, there's a thick smell of palm wine, roasted yam, and something else, coppery and sharp, pricking your nose like an invisible needle. Drums pound in a rhythm older than language, rattling your ribs with each beat. Her throne room is open to the jungle on three sides, vines slithering through the beams like green serpents trying to flee her presence. At her feet lies a line of bound prisoners, their eyes darting from side to side, terrified to see her gold-plated teeth glinting with each flick of her tongue. Historians still argue whether these teeth were ornamental coverings or if she had them filed and gilded as a mark of absolute dominance. Either way, imagine your ruler smiling at you with a mouthful of molten sun. She rose to power by orchestrating alliances through fear rather than trade. Her warriors carried bronze-headed spears, their skin slick with shea oil mixed with red ochre, glistening like demonic statues under moonlight. A light joke here. You think your office team building retreats are tense? Try forging loyalty while your boss casually eats an unlucky rebel's fingers at lunch. But power comes with paranoia. Each dawn, her guards swept her chambers for poisoned thorns hidden in sleeping mats or curses written in crushed cola nut on the walls. She trusted no one, not her advisors, not her lovers, not even the priests who anointed her each dawn with sacred oils reeking of myrrh and smoked lizard fat. Yes, smoked lizard fat. Fringe tidbit number 2 for the night. She built a palace of polished wood, roofed with woven reeds and crowned with statues of animals she had personally killed. A giant hornbill spread its wings across the entrance beam, feathers lacquered stiff with tree sap to last forever. Inside, murals depicted her seated atop a pile of broken spears and gnawed femurs. Her message to guests was unmissable. Historians still argue whether these murals were exaggerations painted by later generations to frighten rebellious children into obedience, or if she truly ordered her artists to immortalize her violence as divine. Either way, it worked. Her people called her the mother who consumes all. Her rivals called her something less flattering in private, though none dared whisper it within her realm. As you stand there now, watching her golden eyes flicker in firelight, you notice her expression is not one of rage or hunger, but of supreme boredom, as if all the world is merely a half-finished meal she can take or leave. One light joke to close this section. If she had a dating profile, it would probably say, loves long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and eating her exes alive. You remain kneeling on the damp earth, eyes fixed on her throne, as a line of silent attendants emerges from behind woven reed curtains. Each carries a platter carved from dark wood, its rim etched with swirling patterns that tell stories older than memory. The scent rising from those platters is thick and hot, roasted meat glazed with honey and smoked palm oil. But tonight is no ordinary feast. The cannibal queen leans forward, her bone and ivory headdress clinking softly with each tilt of her head. She scans the prisoners lined up like animals for slaughter. You hear a soft whimper, quickly muffled. One mainstream historical fact: ritual human sacrifice was documented in multiple African kingdoms, though its form and frequency remain debated. Often, sacrifices were offerings to spirits or ancestors to bless new reigns or guarantee victory. Here, however, there is no priest chanting blessings, only the queen's low hum as she selects her dish for the evening. Historians still argue whether she truly ate her rivals alive, or if later conquerors exaggerated these tales to justify their invasions. But tonight, in the flickering torchlight, you watch as her guards drag a woman forward, a rival queen captured just days before. She still wears torn strands of cowrie shell jewelry, broken in her failed escape. Her eyes blaze with defiance despite her fate, chin lifted high even as her knees buckle. The cannibal queen nods to her attendants. They smear the captive's skin with palm oil mixed with crushed chilies and salt, an act part seasoning, part ritual purification. One fringe tidbit suggests that in some regions, such anointment was believed to release the spirit's power before death, preventing curses from latching onto the eater. Whether superstition or culinary practicality, it burns the captive's skin until sweat streams down her body in shining rivers. You hear a crackle as the fire pit is stoked higher. The queen dips her fingers into a gourd of red palm wine, flicking droplets onto the earth as an offering to whatever gods watch from the dark. She rises, her frame slender yet powerful, draped in woven cloth dyed with indigo and charcoal, patterns shifting like a night sky in motion. Slowly, she approaches the trembling woman. Historians still argue whether she personally inflicted death or merely presided while others carried out the act. Tonight, there is no priest or executioner, only her. She murmurs something low, words lost under the drumbeats, and the captive sags, defeated at last. In a swift motion, the queen draws a blade carved from polished obsidian, edges sharper than steel. There is a single gleaming slice. The smell that rises is so heavy with copper that your stomach flips. She lifts a piece to her lips, chews slowly, and swallows with regal indifference. The hall is silent except for the thundering of your heart. A light joke here. Imagine going to a dinner party, and your host not only cooks but sources the ingredients from her guest list. Talk about locally sourced and organic. As the feast continues, the other platters are opened, revealing roasted goat, steamed plantains, and smoked fish arranged with groundnut sauce. For her warriors and advisors, it is a grand banquet. For her, tonight's delicacy is rival flesh, eaten not out of starvation or necessity, but to stamp her dominion onto every rumor whispered about her in the dark. One mainstream historical fact: archaeological digs in Central African rainforests have uncovered banquet pits filled with goat, pig, and even leopard bones, suggesting elite feasting rituals were central to court life. However, no definitive human remains have been found in such contexts. Historians still argue whether this absence is proof against cannibal tales, or if human remains were treated separately in ritual burials away from refuse pits. The question remains open. You notice a child peeking from behind a pillar, wide-eyed, silent, absorbing this spectacle as easily as breathing. Perhaps he will grow up to serve her. Perhaps he will grow up to flee into the forest and tell the stories that centuries later become the nightmare you now hear. The queen's gaze drifts across the banquet hall, bored once again, as if eating a rival alive is no more exciting than shelling peanuts. She raises her gold and ivory goblet, its stem carved into a woman's figure with arms raised in surrender. Palm wine dribbles down her chin as she drinks deeply, and you hear her murmur a blessing to herself. Historians still argue whether these feasts were ceremonial, offerings to gods or ancestors to solidify her reign, or merely brutal displays of dominance designed to keep her subjects too terrified to rebel. One fringe tidbit claims she forced her attendants to dance barefoot on glowing coals during these feasts, their burned feet a living sacrifice to her insatiable hunger. You look down at your own feet, grateful for the cool dirt, and wonder how you would fare in her court. Would you be a dancer, an attendant, or a main course? Another light joke before this section ends. If you think your boss chewing you out is bad, be glad it's just metaphorical. She sits back, licking her fingers, golden teeth gleaming like the horizon at dawn. The drums fade, replaced by a rising chant of praise as her warriors pound spear shafts against the earth. Tonight's feast is over, but tomorrow's hunger always awaits. The flickering torches burn lower as the feast ends, and attendants quietly gather the empty platters, stepping carefully to avoid smearing blood across the woven reed mats. You remain still, your breath shallow as the cannibal queen rises from her throne. Her headdress clinks softly with each step, and the bone charms sewn into her waistcloth rattle like distant rain against stone. She moves through the silent hall toward her private chambers. The crowd parts instantly, heads bowed, eyes fixed to the ground. You trail behind her in your mind, through the curtained doorway heavy with the scent of lemongrass smoke and ground cola nut. Here, deep within her inner sanctum, her secrets hide among carved wooden chests, baskets of scented resins, and rows of polished gourds sealed with beeswax. Historians still argue whether these chambers contained her personal trophies, bones of enemies and rivals, or whether those stories were woven by later oral historians to frighten rebellious grandchildren. What we do know is that royalty across West and Central Africa stored precious ritual items in guarded rooms, accessible only to the ruler and their closest attendants. She sits cross-legged on a woven mat, her posture perfectly straight despite hours of feasting. An elderly attendant, skin painted with swirling white kaolin designs, kneels to undo the queen's headdress. As each ivory plate is lifted away, Her hair tumbles free, long, dark braids streaked with ochre clay to keep insects away. One fringe tidbit claims that in her kingdom, ruler's hair was considered so sacred it was never cut, only added to with extensions from sacrificed captives, weaving power and fear together strand by strand. A faint candle flickers near the chamber's only window slit. You can hear night insects buzzing outside, the rhythmic chirp of geckos echoing off the mud walls. She reaches for a shallow bowl carved from elephant bone, filled with a thick brown paste. Using 2 fingers, she smears it across her lips, cheeks, and chin. The scent is pungent, crocodile fat mixed with crushed charcoal and cinnamon. Historians still argue whether this paste was ceremonial, culinary, or medicinal. Some believe it kept biting flies away. Others say it masked the scent of blood clinging to her breath. One mainstream historical fact: crocodile fat mixed with herbs was widely used as sunscreen and insect repellent in tropical regions. Practical. Yes, though you doubt sunscreen was her main priority tonight. She leans back against a bolster pillow, staring at the woven reed ceiling. Her eyelids droop as exhaustion softens her sharp features. For a moment, you see not the cannibal queen but a woman barely 30, burdened by unrelenting vigilance. But then her golden teeth glint as she sighs, and the illusion of fragility vanishes. Her attendants light a resin incense cone, sweet smoke curling into the darkness. You watch as she dips a wooden spoon into a shallow gourd filled with congealed dark lumps. She lifts it to her lips and chews slowly. The taste is thick and earthy, tinged with iron. It is said she believed consuming small pieces of her enemies daily would keep their spirits trapped within her, strengthening her rule and feeding her own spirit so it would remain unchallenged. Historians still argue whether her cannibalism was ceremonial, part of ancient spiritual practices involving ancestor or enemy consumption, or pure political theater designed to cultivate terror. One fringe tidbit suggests that later Arab and Portuguese traders spread tales of African cannibal queens to justify slave raids and conquests. Yet local oral histories also whisper about her secret hunger that could never be sated. No matter how many captives her warriors brought back, she wipes her lips delicately, as if finishing dessert at a royal banquet, and sets the spoon aside. Then she calls for her royal griot, the historian singer who records each day in praise chants. A young woman steps forward, holding a 4-stringed lute carved from dark redwood. She begins to play softly, her voice weaving words that drift like woven smoke through the queen's chambers. You catch fragments, praise for victories, a recounting of the feast, a warning to the spirits of her enemies not to haunt their devourer. Another light joke to ease your shoulders. Imagine your bedtime routine involving a hot shower, skin care, and eating your political rivals with cinnamon and crocodile fat for dessert. Self-care, queen. As the song ends, the queen reclines onto a mat of woven palm fibers and buffalo hide. The flickering candlelight casts shadows that ripple across her strong arms and quiet face. She closes her eyes, golden teeth faintly visible between parted lips, and exhales one final breath for the day, as if dismissing the world itself until dawn returns to kneel before her. Outside, the jungle hums with life, cicadas, frogs, and the soft hiss of distant rainfall moving through the canopy like an invisible river. The queen sleeps, her dreams filled with echoes of battle cries and drums, feasts and betrayals, each memory marinated in fear and triumph. She will wake tomorrow as hungry as ever, for power, for flesh, for the trembling silence that spreads wherever her name is spoken. You wake at dawn to the deep boom of war drums echoing through the mist-choked jungle. The cannibal queen is already standing at the edge of her terrace, eyes fixed on the horizon where a long line of warriors approaches. Their bronze-tipped spears catch the rising sun, turning them into a slithering metal river cutting through morning fog. Behind them shuffle captives, bound with twisted vines, their heads bowed in resigned terror. Today is different. You can feel it in the taut silence of her attendants, in the way the queen's eyes narrow with cold calculation. Whispers ripple through the ranks like wind through tall grass. Revolt brews beneath the surface. Historians still argue whether it was her advisors, her generals, or her people themselves who finally rose against her. But revolt came all the same. She lifts her chin, gold teeth gleaming as she calls for her war priest. The old man emerges, painted head to toe in black charcoal mixed with red palm oil, his hair woven with bone charms and python vertebrae. One mainstream historical fact: African war priests often carried small iron or stone amulets believed to contain spirits that could turn enemy weapons aside or bring plague upon rival camps. He chants softly, voice trembling with age, as he ties a leather strap bearing a carved stone around her wrist. She flexes her fingers and turns away from him without a word. You notice the quiet flicker of fear in his eyes as she passes. Even her priests are not immune to the knowledge of what she is capable of. Her warriors form tight ranks, shields raised, spears angled forward, but beyond them, the people gather, farmers, potters, wood carvers, basket weavers, all armed with machetes, hoes, and sharpened stakes. Their eyes burn with desperation and rage. Historians still argue whether their rebellion was driven by starvation, moral disgust at her feasts, or cunning manipulation by her closest generals eager to seize the throne. Perhaps it was all three. One fringe tidbit suggests her final banquet included roasted human flesh laced with toxic herbs, fed to those she suspected of plotting against her. Some believe the revolt was sparked when her advisors realized she intended to poison them all, leaving no challengers alive. Whether truth or legend, it adds yet another poisonous layer to her final days. She steps down from her terrace, barefoot on the packed earth, her toenails painted crimson with powdered camwood. As she walks toward her assembled warriors, silence ripples outward. Even the cicadas pause their shrill chant. You stand among the crowd, tasting dust and fear in the heavy dawn air. Raising her obsidian blade high, she begins a chant in a voice that resonates from deep within her chest. Her warriors join, the sound building into a thunderous roar that shakes the branches overhead. For a fleeting moment, you feel almost inspired. Her power is that potent, that intoxicating. But the rebels surge forward, spears clash against machetes, shields splinter beneath hoes swung with desperate force. The air fills with screams, the metallic scent of blood, and the bitter tang of sweat and fear. She stands at the heart of the chaos, blade flashing in the gray morning light. 3 rebels fall before her, their bodies crumpling like broken dolls. Historians still argue whether she was killed in that first furious clash or dragged back to her throne room in chains. Some say she was speared through the chest, her golden teeth bared in a final triumphant smile. Others claim she surrendered only when surrounded by a circle of fire, lit with sacred herbs meant to strip her spirit of its power. One mainstream historical fact: many African queens captured in revolt were executed publicly to sever their spiritual claim to leadership. However, in her case, local legends claim she spoke a curse upon her killers as her blood pooled around her feet. Her voice was calm, almost amused, as she declared that whoever tasted her blood or touched her flesh would never sleep peacefully again. One fringe tidbit says her severed head blinked twice after being displayed on a wooden pike, and that her golden teeth bit the executioner's hand before the spirit within finally stilled. A light joke to ease the tension. Imagine leaving a job so dramatically that your resignation speech haunts the company for generations. Now that's going out with a bang. As her body was carried away, drums fell silent. Smoke drifted across the battlefield, curling around the twisted roots and fallen warriors. Her throne stood empty for the first time in decades, the ivory yellowing in dawn's cold light. Her palace fell into ruin soon after. Vines creeping over carved beams, termites hollowing out floors where once only trembling servants had walked, but her name did not fade. Even now, as you stand amid the hush of her final battlefield, you feel her gaze on you, unblinking, golden teeth glinting in the shadows of your thoughts. Long after her body crumbled into the red earth, the Cannibal Queen's legend kept growing like jungle vines in the rainy season. Traders carried whispers of her across river routes and forest paths, stories that morphed with each retelling until truth and terror became impossible to untangle. You walk now through her abandoned palace grounds. The stone steps are cracked and buckled by tree roots, thick as elephant legs. Birds nest where warriors once stood guard. Shadows flicker in the early evening light, dancing across broken ivory carvings and faded murals. One mainstream historical fact: in many ancient African kingdoms, abandoned royal sites became sacred places, avoided by locals out of fear of lingering spirits or curses woven into the land itself. At the center of her old throne room lies a moss-covered slab of stone. Some believe it marks the place where she was finally slain. Others say it seals the entrance to a hidden chamber where her golden teeth and obsidian blade remain buried. Historians still argue whether her burial site was deliberately hidden to prevent rivals from desecrating her remains, or whether she was left exposed to the jungle as a punishment for her alleged crimes. You kneel beside the slab and brush away dead leaves. Tiny black ants scurry across the stone's surface, vanishing into hairline cracks. The air is still here, too still. Even the cicadas keep their silence beneath the lowering dusk. One fringe tidbit claims that in the 1920s, a European anthropologist found gold dental caps among local regalia and believed they belonged to the Cannibal Queen herself. He wrote about a terrifying female ruler with teeth of sun-bright metal who devoured the living. But his notes were lost when his expedition riverboat sank, leaving only oral retellings of his frantic final radio calls. You stand and gaze across the encroaching jungle. Trees sway, their leaves hissing with secrets. Somewhere in the canopy, a hornbill croaks its harsh song, and you remember her golden eyes in the firelight, the bored flick of her tongue as she tasted victory, or simply dinner. Historians still argue whether her cannibalism was ritual, myth, or political propaganda. Some anthropologists believe tales of flesh-eating queens were woven by later conquerors to dehumanize powerful female rulers, justifying their subjugation and removal. Others point to local oral histories that tell her story with chilling clarity, describing feasts and sacrifices not as horror tales, but as warnings of what power can become when fed by absolute fear. You step away from the ruined palace, feet brushing through knee-high ferns. The sun slips beneath the trees, casting the world into a heavy, humming twilight. One light joke before the darkness deepens. If your meal prep ever feels tedious, just be glad it doesn't involve choosing between goat stew and your latest political rival. As you reach the jungle path, you glance back one last time. Her throne is hidden by shadows, vines draped across carved skulls and broken spears. Yet in your mind, she still sits there, golden teeth gleaming, eyes half-lidded with weary supremacy, the Cannibal Queen who ate her rivals alive not merely to survive, but to reign with terror so absolute that centuries later, Her story still gnaws at the edges of your sleep. You walk on into the gathering dark, the cicadas finally raising their shrill chant behind you, as if mocking your relief that the tale has ended. But her legend will not end. It curls through history, half dream, half nightmare, waiting for the next telling to wake it once more. Now, let your breath soften and deepen as the darkness folds around you like a cool woven blanket. The jungle grows quiet again in your mind. The torches gutter out one by one, leaving only moonlight drifting through the canopy in gentle silver ribbons. You can almost hear the distant beat of old drums fading into the hush, their echoes swallowed by time and moss. The cannibal queen's throne crumbles further with each passing century, its ivory eaten away by rain and rot, until it becomes part of the earth she ruled so ruthlessly. Her golden teeth lose their shine, buried beneath layers of leaf litter, and her obsidian blade dulls under slow drips of rainfall seeping through stone. The vines climb higher each dawn, weaving her memory into green shadows and quiet sighs of wind moving through unseen spaces. You rest now, knowing that while her story chilled your skin tonight, her power cannot touch you here. Her hunger is trapped in the past, a haunting echo that drifts away with each deep breath you take. Inhale, feeling your chest expand, your shoulders heavy with sleep. Exhale, letting the last flickers of torchlight fade into darkness. Soon your dreams will soften into gentle darkness, carrying you far from her feasts, far from her throne room, far from the taste of fear clinging to the backs of silent throats. You will drift instead into quiet breezes, cool night air brushing across your face, as the moon rises calm and unbothered above the sleeping jungle. She cannot follow you here. No queen, no curse, no hunger, only quiet, only sleep.